What happens when a Silicon Valley engineer walks away from the startup race to rediscover meaning on the other side of the world? Today, I'm speaking with Abish Ghimire, co founder of JobScreener AI, whose journey from California to Kathmandu and now to Australia reveals how reflection, resilience, and AI innovation can completely redefine a career. Welcome to the next breakthrough with Sean Campbell. Hi, Abish. How are you?
Hey, Sean. Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely a pleasure. Now, we'll start off. You spent about a decade in Silicon Valley, surrounded by startups and IPOs, and then you chose to leave it all behind and you moved to Kathmandu of all places. Can you tell us a little bit about what made you walk away from that world of the Bay Area, and what did you discover about yourself in the process?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So I was in the Bay Area for about 12 years. Started out in a large company, Fortune 500, and then wanted to try my fortune over in some startups. So I did a couple of startups. I think, after over a decade, I pretty much kind of felt like I was living in a bubble, right? Everybody lives in a bubble these days, and Silicon Valley is no exception, right? You're kind of chasing that the next big startup or next big technology. And so after I had my pretty much my first child, I was trying to find a balance between having some time to spend with my children, with my child, first child, and then with my career. So right around that time, I don't know, the company, the startup I was working at that time, they were kind of towards the edge, right? I could see that they were not really doing well. So I kind of made the pivot at the time to say, hey, you know what? Like, I've always had this desire to become an entrepreneur and try some things on my own. So I think I'd come to a maturity point where, after working very closely with C-level executives, and I was a product manager then, I could really see myself sort of taking the leadership role and maybe starting something new. I'm originally from Kathmandu, Nepal. So that was sort of my comfort place. I mean, Silicon Valley is a competitive place. I wanted to sort of get out of that and really kind of rethink about where I was headed for the next maybe decade or so. So coming back to where it all started, basically in Kathmandu, allowed me to sort of do that, start afresh from a new perspective. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. Being in a very competitive and very fast pace to Kathmandu Valley, which is still a valley, not a Silicon Valley, but I felt it was a lot laid back and allowed me to kind of go back and reflect some of the things I had done and really think about where I was headed next. That was around 2013, 2014. So, so it's interesting times when, you had sort of gone over that real estate bust and
Yeah.
the big banks and all of that. So it was right around that time when everything was sort of starting to look good, but you still had the residual effect from the real estate crash in the U.S.
I think I was reflecting on my own journey being back in 2000, 2002 during the dot com. That was the time I spent in the Bay Area as well. And then that's the first time I traveled to Southeast Asia, and I saw
Right.
a whole different type of culture, opened my mind to different things that you wouldn't normally see in the West. And you start to really, reflect on how you're living, and taking in all perspectives from people from different countries, and different experiences you would never have. And that's part of the love of travel I think I have, and that's
Yeah.
probably why I'm living overseas. I've been in Thailand for 8
Yeah.
years, and now I've been in Australia for 9. So
Right.
it's quite adventurous, I think, and I encourage everyone to spend some
100%.
time traveling and understand where different perspectives are coming from. I think get out of that bubble, as you mentioned, have people thinking about what does it mean, when you're surrounded by, if everyone's telling you the same thing, is that really the best situation to be in?
Yeah, no, just like what you said, I think what happened was that right around 2010, I think 2010, took this a meditation course when I was actually visiting family in Nepal for it was like a 10-day meditation course, and I think that really triggered me. Once I got back to Silicon Valley after that, I really started questioning a lot of the things and that I was doing and chasing after. Um, and coming back, in 2013 to Kathmandu, to Nepal, one of the things that I was lucky enough to do was to visit Myanmar at that time, and I actually launched a couple of mobile apps, fintech mobile apps when I was in Myanmar, and I visited the country probably 8 or 9 times during that period, and I think Buddhism at that time had a lot of sort of effect on me as well. Just the spirituality that you can't escape, when you're in Myanmar. And similarly in Nepal as well, there's a lot of effects of Buddhism and spirituality in Nepal. So, all of that really allowed me to take a completely different mindset about things and the way you look at life, right? I was, I think, lucky enough to get some time that I could spend in there. But then I actually in 2014 I came back to Silicon Valley, right? So I like right after a couple of years of living overseas in Kathmandu, I came back and I realized that this wasn't the place for me anymore. So again, I actually moved out of there and went to some of my closest relatives are in Washington D.C. area. So I moved to the East Coast, and then East Coast again wasn't something that I really enjoyed. I think it was primarily the weather because I was sort of spoiled living in California for too long, right? I mean, you know how it's like, you know. So I settled in San Diego after that, and the rest is history, right? San Diego is a beautiful place.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, best weather in the country, I think.
exactly.
Absolutely. So take me back to the days you're working in Myanmar, you're building apps, and you built something called My Rate. Is that that was the
That's
main
right.
focus of the
My
time there?
Yes, so my rate and Myanmar exchange rate. So initially, I was taking some idea from the US market, right? So I forgot what the app was. In the US, there was a sort of a financial services app you could go in, and let's say if you were looking for home loans, right? You could go in, you can put your zip code, you can look at, what's the loan amount, what's the valuation.
Maybe bankrate.com or
Bankrate,
something?
that's what it is.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So that's the idea about, Bankrate, my rate, my being the Myanmar. So we looked into that and so started sort of like, all right, this is Myanmar was just opening up, right? It was coming out of 50 years of military rule to under democracy, sort of a semi-democracy. And so it was opening up. The economy was opening up. Lots of new investments coming in, a lot of tourists coming in. So it was a big deal, sort of at that time, if you remember. And I think Obama visited there twice or something like that, right? So it was all over the news. It was a big deal back then. And so I started working with over 35 banks in Myanmar to see how we can offer some of their services to just the general population. I think we were a little too early, I would say, because the banks there didn't even have sort of the core banking systems. A lot of the things where, believe me or not, it was really fax that you would send from interbanking, overnight, and it was
Mhm.
Excel and everything was done a very old school way. And so here we are, trying to bring in the latest and greatest sort of technology and so I think the banks just did not have that foundation that we were looking for, and it would have taken us probably 3 to 4 years to even get anywhere close to what we were looking at. So it was not a good success, but overall, I think it was a good lesson that we learned. There was a couple of banks that gave us some opportunity, and even like the mobile phones back then were not as widely used, I guess, at this time. I mean, the adoption was picking up, but there were just like two new mobile operators coming in. There was an old government one. So a lot of things that didn't really allow us to sort of
Mhm.
fit into their existing infrastructure.
Yeah, some of those markets, I guess you'd call the frontier markets, are things you have to invest in for the long term. It's very, I think, challenging to make the quick money there. You have to invest in the time and the culture, and have local partners and all the rest to really make things work. What lessons do you think you took from that experience in how you approach building products now?
There's always lessons learned, right, from failures as well as on a success side. I think for me, the lesson was that, just like what you mentioned, you need to be have local partners. You need to be present there in some ways, especially if you're doing anything in Asia. You need to be sort of locally present. You can't just think like I'm going to do everything remotely. Because the thing is, when you were there, things would happen, right? When you're going there, you're meeting with people, things are happening. This As soon as you left, everything would go back to status quo. It would be stand still, right? I think the major thing would be to invest in long term. I mean, it's when you have a product, when you have an idea, it may sound great, and it may even have a perfect market, opportunity, but finding that product market fit is going to be a long term game, right? It's not going to be right away. So having that flexibility and building partners, maybe offering, being lean and sort of offering, different types of product mixes was important. I think for us was finding the right partners. At the banks with the partners, some of the non, government organizations that were there that were helping the population with the financial education, financial literacy. Those were very primary partners for us. And like you said, probably a long-term game that you're not looking to monetize something right away, but really looking for long-term opportunities.
Makes sense. Yeah. And so more recently, you've started JobScreener AI. So how is this reimagining the way recruiters are evaluating candidates? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Your current company.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so JobScreener AI is obviously an AI powered recruitment platform that does many things. One is looking at the candidate resume and overall soft skills and hard skills. And once you do that, you're also allowing our conversational AI that allows to take the interviews and screening calls to the candidates. And the way we're targeting right now is we're interested in more in the voice call as well as telephone conversation. I think that's more natural. I myself feel very natural when I'm talking to AI on the phone, maybe not on a video, right? When I'm being recorded myself, I'm a little bit sensitive about other things. And I think overall, I think we got a feedback from recruiters themselves that even candidate themselves were not ready or sort of hesitant to have video calls. So we focused on phone calls, which was a great strategy because we could really focus on the skills and not look at other visual cues or anything like that, and really understanding from voice, which has been studied for decades, about the voice confidence, the communication skills, and other types of skills that we could understand from having that voice conversation. So really, gives the recruiter a sort of a 360-degree view of a candidate based on resume, their other supplements that they may have, as well as from the phone interview, and understanding their hard skills and soft skills. So yeah, that's pretty much where we are at this point.
So it plays a role in detecting the tone and the kind of confidence using the voice analysis. But how close do you think AI is truly understanding the human communication?
Yeah, no, I think through there's been, I mean, we've been working on this for easily a couple of years now, right? If you were to ask me the same question last year, I would be pretty frustrated to answer that, because it was nowhere sort of. But the speed of innovation, the speed of changes that we've seen, and the choices now that we have, is it's enormous difference, night and day between last year and now. I think in many ways, like I said, from a voice perspective, I think there's been a lot of study. We use not only one sort of system or algorithm or platform to test that. We know we license certain technologies that come out of, for example, universities, University of Southern California, for example, and that has been studied for decades by scientists and professors and some of the leading industry research. So I'm actually surprised now that it can detect the communication. Again, you got to look at multiple things, right? It's not only a sample that we look at longer sample, we look at through multiple sort of algorithms. We look at, transcript, we look at just the voice in a variation itself. So with that, I would say, it's pretty accurate. Would I rely? I don't see why not. I think it's really gives you sort of an indication. And again, since we're have everything is de-identified data, there's no such of your any bias or anything like that. And I think that's where it's interesting. And I mean, obviously, it's in changing technology. We can't say for sure, that it's 100% accurate. I think it can be relied on, and it can give you sort of a clear picture of where you want to focus in. And gives you sort of the strengths and weaknesses of all candidates in terms of this visual, or certain cues that you can have. But again, like with anything, it's a data for you to sort of process and validate yourself. We provide a lot of those tools where you can go back and sort of listen to certain recordings and confirm that those were actually being analyzed in the right way.
So, how do you address what I'd call like auditory bias? So you'd have different accents, different dialects, maybe different cultural, unique speech patterns, something like that, that, would be addressed or compared to core metrics like communication clarity in a sense. Like, how do you make sure there isn't bias in the training data that you're relying on, given that there's
Yeah.
different regional differences?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I mean, again, even myself, English is my second language, and like if I'm designing something that I would be comfortable, I would obviously make sure that I'm not being biased by the system that I'm creating, right? So I think that was the first thing. And when you sell it, when you try to go and sell it to recruiters through your demos, and these are the questions that get asked. The first thing that we do is, we've looked at that, and we've looked at some of the algorithms that are used, for example, IELTS testing, where you're looking at, and these data are from English as a second language, right? Like, so a lot of these data, there are certain companies that have a lot of this training data for different accents. Could be right anywhere. If someone, I think IELTS is more prevalent to UK and Australia as a testing assessment. And so we've looked at that, we apply multiple things, and we just don't source our data from one particular algorithm, but we look at multiple to make sure that there is a correlation, and also make sure that we prioritize based on different information we have. So we've done a lot of our testing was actually, this year was done a lot on the voice bias as well as the accents, making sure that we understand that our system is not biased. For example, one of the things we looked at was words spoken over a minute, right? We used to count that. And as a natural, if English is your first language, you're speaking very fast, and you would have more words per minute. And as a if English is a second language, you would have less per minute. And so we looked at that, and we said, like, a lot of our data showed that the people with accents and people that don't have this as their mother tongue are actually being have a lower performance on that, right? So we discarded things like that.
Okay.
We don't count those as something that we should include as communication skills. But obviously there are places where that could be more relevant, right? Some roles where, if you have, I don't know, for a particular sales role, maybe, right? You would want someone who has maybe a much more faster speaking ability, or maybe customer service where you want more clarity. So I don't think it's a one size fits all, when it comes to that. And I think that's where we are sort of allowing that flexibility in our platform, so that you can understand the candidate from a more holistic perspective, and see if that would be a fitting for your role that you're hiring for.
It's a data point, as you mentioned. It's not the ultimate decision, right? It's just one
Yeah,
piece of data to be considered when someone is getting screened for roles. And I think AI is an assistant. It's not the replacement for the recruiter.
correct.
I look at it another way as well. Recruiters could be so overly busy, and they might start relying too heavily on this kind of AI objective score or whatever your scoring system is, especially if it's giving you a kind of a compelling, seemingly objective insight, like say, leadership potential, for example.
Yeah.
So how do you work with the customers to understand that this is just a piece of input, not not be lazy and just disregard the human checking or the human judgment, the discernment.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. One of the things, as you know, is that there's always human in the loop, right? When it comes to AI. So we started with certain principles as to how do we want it, and then the reason we did that is that we looked at regulations, right? Like for example, we were first launching in Australia, so we looked at regulations for Australia and making sure that we are complying with the privacy as well as transparency and things like that. So I think from that perspective, we looked at regulations, we looked at what needs to be prioritized and making sure that we are including those as our product development roadmap. And those are the items that we are tracking. We are measuring those and we're improving on those performances. So I would say it's one of the metrics that we look after, we track, we make sure that we have more data and we have human in the loop where we're not making a decision for a recruiter or an employer, but we do up a certain point and then we ask them to, or the user, to say what's the conclusion to you, what's the next step, right? Do you want to shortlist this interviewee? Do you want to drop, move it to the next level? So really, it's the at after a certain point, like you said, it's a you let the human sort of take over. And actually, in that case, you have human take over at any point. You can cancel the interview. Your interviewee could request that they don't want to do AI interview.
Mm,
They
okay.
could choose to have an actually human taking the interview. So it's always been a thought that at this point we don't want to blindly rely on AI because there are several factors that we don't know. So we allow that as AI human sort of interaction.
So what type of companies or what kind of feedback are you getting? What results are you seeing from recruiters?
Yeah, so that's been interesting actually. So we're seeing that this is more attractive where there's a very high volume of hiring, right? So if we go to, let's say, if a recruiting agency is hiring 2 roles per month, then something like this may be an overkill for them, right? So because they have enough time to sort of call and have that personal touch. I don't think there's a I mean, as we know, right, this is a very starting point of AI, and it's not mainstream. There's a lot of questions about it. There's a lot of regulations coming forth, as well as dependency and reliance on AI is still doubtful and questionable. So
The
I think from that,
technology is advancing so quickly, I mean, as well.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's where I think what we see is that the early adopters are the one that are purely frustrated by old ways of doing things. So we're seeing where global companies that have like for example talent acquisition like directors that are working with candidates across different regions of the world, they can't keep up, right? They have some candidates they're hiring in Europe, some candidates in North America, some candidates in Asia. So for them something like this would be perfect. And the second is like I said, high volume hiring healthcare workers, and particularly here with aged care where there is low retention of employee, really high churn, and so that's where it's getting more attractive. We're trying to test more in the call center space, and that's been ongoing. But primarily, we're seeing where there is really like high churn of employees and high volumes of hiring, maybe in something in hundreds or even thousands of employees required, new employees required every year. That's where the early adoption is, because we can really help them with significant amount of efficiency and workload reduction for them, right? Really doing the front end of the work, shortlisting the candidates and giving them more data about the candidates, and things like that.
Do you foresee moving into video as well? The technology is getting much better. I remember, a year ago, the avatars were a bit clunky and moving jerky and the mouth looked
Yeah.
strange. They're getting a little bit smoother now. And it seems like, you're starting to see things like deep fake videos and, people mimicking their parents and scams going on and all the
Right.
rest, right? But, like, do you foresee having a visual HR, interviewer, doing the screening, the recruiters? Is that something you would be looking into, provided the technology is smooth enough for that?
Not really. I mean, I think that's a technical problem, right? I mean, I think that's we are here to sort of solve business problem with AI, and getting a video really does not solve the business problem, right? So I think we're looking into how can we add more value to our customers with AI. The second thing we're looking at is how do we, bring more value from what we've already built, the platform that we've built, to more people, to more population, right? And the third thing is that we want to make greater impact, right? So how can we make greater impact? I think those are the sort of I would say value proposition we're looking at, increasing the value of the company, increasing the value of the product and platform. And for that, we need participation from, larger amount of data, larger amount of participation from overall population. So I think it's really value driven, and I don't see having video, non-video would really make us competitive. I don't think we're solving the problem. And especially when you think about AI, I think we really need to sort of reimagine what it can do and how it can solve the problems in a new way. So the old way of doing things and working, it's not gonna, it's not going to cut it. So I think, we need to really think about the impact and scale. And it's, I think, for me, one of the lessons of being an entrepreneur is that you have to think big, right? Like you have to think big, or you go home, you pack up and leave. And so I think, we're really thinking about, with AI, like what's the biggest impact we can have with things that we've built, and the things that we will be building over the next, 3 to 6 months. So that's really what we're focused in.
Right. And if you had to give advice to, someone watching this, listening to this, that maybe not as technical as you, not into the AI space, but they're wanting to understand what's happening with AI, what would be the number one thing they should start thinking about or doing first?
Honestly, there's so much, noise as well as resources now that you can get started with AI. I think really the main thing is to kind of understand what are you trying to do, right? Because you could be like, if I'm not wanting to be a machine learning engineer, then I shouldn't be going and taking a machine learning course and trying to do that, right? If I'm not trying to be, I think people have to sort of figure out like what are you good at and where do you want to be, and sort of really focus and then use, because this is, in some ways it's AI, as we know, it democratizes everything that we know, right? The playing field is leveled, so everybody has a role to play, and don't try to be somebody else just because you know that this person has done so or want to be successful. I think really reflecting on oneself, and really understanding like, where does AI help me to take to the next level that I want to go in, or like how can I, with my skills, really contribute to the AI economy. And I think if you sort of are clear on that, then I think you'll find your own path, right? There's so many resources out there. um and I would say even for us to just learn prompt engineering, right? That's sort of 101 of AI. Is really the better the questions you asked, the better answers you would get from LLMs and AI. Go out on YouTube, whatever, to find the resources, but be very clear as to what are you trying to be. And I think with that, it naturally sets a path for all of us.
I think some of the non-technical folks who are very good at communication are actually probably very well placed for this, because they have to be able to tell the system, the AI system, what you actually want and get better responses. So, yeah, I think it's nothing to fear. I think whether you're technical or not, it's just dive in and start with a business problem. What's the one pressing problem you have right now that you could potentially automate?
Yeah.
That's probably where I would start.
100%. I mean, it touches every sector that we know of, right? So if you're in marketing, how do you become good at marketing using AI? If you're in sales, how do you become more efficient using that? If you're an engineer, how do you write better code? It actually helps everyone come better and use the technology. So I think that's where the excitement is, because like I said, it's not only one sector that it touches, but the impact is going to be tremendous in terms of the number of people that can really jump into the air. And actually, for that fact, I just created a new group. Actually, I created a Facebook group where I'm going to sort of help non-technical people join in, and I started with the Nepalese population. So,
Ooh,
and I created a group for AI for Nepalese, to really help them understand, grow, and even share and network
mm,
with a lot of people, like-minded people that are wanting to learn about AI and want to grow. So everyone has to sort of understand, where do you start? How can you help? How can people like us, who are sort of lucky to get into this very early on, also have sort of a responsibility to share and educate? And I'm getting good response, and I'm getting good feedback, and I think it's really exciting for all of us.
great. Well, thank you for joining. And before we go, just for your contact information, where's the best place for people to reach you? What's the name of the Facebook group, or reach you on LinkedIn, or is there the website? Where's the best place to get in contact with you?
I'm available on LinkedIn. I get reached out from various people on LinkedIn, and I'm very active on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn. If you go to JobScreener AI, you can contact me there if you want a demo or anything like that. The Facebook group is called AI for Nepalese, and it just, like I said, it's doesn't mean just Nepalese people, but also kind of open to everyone that's learning, that want to grow. But yeah, I think LinkedIn would be the best source to get in touch with me.
Great. Well, thank you, Abish. I appreciate the time you spent with us today, and look forward to reconnecting soon.
Sure, thanks for having me, son.
Thanks. Bye.
Get Take care.